Part 2. Let's talk design. So for this design, for your pattern in your advent calendar, I have given you a full stitch plan. This is very much the way I work. I look at a design, I will decide the stitches, decide the colorways, and then work from there. I will do a pencil sketch most of the time to make sure my colors are in the places I expect them to be, and then I select my supplies compared to all of that. Things can change. So I've requested myself this time to the stitches I have put on your stitch plan. But it may well be that some don't work. So we'll see how that goes. So the idea is I started from two things. The pistachio purple that I think all of you have got in your advent calendars, and this pink imitation leather. Not all of you will have, but you will have a selection of 5 different imitation leathers and cork fabric that will, I'm sure you'll find something that you like. I'm hoping you'll find something that you like. The purple I'm going to work here with is actually in 2 thicknesses, so that will not, you will have a selection in your advent calendar, but may not, this color may not be in 2 different thicknesses. I want to use the thicker one on the outside and the thinner one on the inside, and also here. Depending on how I work with outlines, I will finish when I want to tidy up the edge, or I will start with the outline. In this case, I'm going to start with the outline because all the stitches I want to add next to it, I want some like a physical barrier that allows me to butt my stitches to it. So I will start in the middle, then this layer, then the outside layer, I think. Now, what else am I using? I'm using this, I think this color is called Rose, and I think all of you have it in your advent calendar to do some couching here. Then coming in, I'm going to do some blanket stitch in this Korry braid that all of you will definitely have in your advent calendar. Moving in, detached buttonhole. This is one of the colors I've changed. I originally had the green, and when I did my color sketch, I realized I needed a pink. That was fitting up better. And that's a Purl Thinker 16. That's the first time I'm going to try to do detached buttonhole in that thread. I think it's going to work, but we'll see. Moving in, we have another outline of purl. This bit will probably be left as the background fabric. Inside, we're moving to padded satin stitch. I'm going to use this bright Korry thread. Not all of you will have this color, but you'll have a selection of color in your pack. Still moving in, another purple outline, and then inside we're going to do some long and short. I've selected 2 colors of a refill floss that goes well together and with my theme. You will have at least one of those, but you also have some Presentia stranded cotton with more colors, and I'm hoping you have enough in your stash to find something that you like. And then finally we'll do some rows of stem stitch in the smaller leaves in this other color of Korry silk Mori, which is a stranded silk, very similar in thickness than the needle point ink that you also have in your pack. And I love working with them. So this is what I'm looking at for my colors. Pink and green, I must admit, is not something I work in a lot, but it's been growing on me since it's been on the table since yesterday. So we'll see. Let's see now. I think for today, what we're going to do is start with the purple outline. I'll put that in this video, and then we'll see where we are in terms of timing. I don't want to make those videos too long, and see where we get from there, and what's coming up in part 3. Let's start with the purple outline. So I'm using the 1mm thickness, which is a standard. A lot of the colors on my website exist in this thickness, and the other one that I'll be using later is the 1.5 that is slightly thicker. slightly sturdier. It also exists in a lot of colors on the website. The other thing I need is a good quality polyester thread. I'm by default using Gutermann Suall. Every now and again I use Embroiderer Aerofill because I have quite a collection as well, but mainly I'm so used to using Gutermann. For purl, there is two schools. I learned that I needed to wax my thread regardless, whatever the metallic thread I was using. But I've learned recently that you don't always necessarily need to wax your thread when working with purl. So I've been experimenting with that. It's up to you what you prefer. It does work both ways. I think waxing is very much needed if you go through the thread, but not necessarily if you're using a good quality thread like Gutermann, you shouldn't need to wax it. So what I'm going to do, because I'm a bit lazy today, I am not going to wax it and see how that works. And how we work with purl. So purl is this, let me focus this, is this very stiff wire that has been coiled on itself. In order to catch it on the surface, we need to open those coils slightly. Some, depending on the purl you're using, some of them, like the Benton & Johnson one, you just need to literally lightly run your fingers alongside it and that's enough to open. These are a bit sturdier than that. They're made out of copper and dyed, so it makes them a little bit stiffer to work with. So what I do, and it's going to be difficult to show on camera, is I will grab the end on each side between the nail of my thumb and my forefinger, do the same on the other side, and I literally, again, from the camera setting it's difficult to show, but I literally pull and it stretches it enough. When it stretches it, I know it's stretched enough when my purl, so at the moment my purl, because it is stored as a big coil, tends to have a slight bend to it, so it wants to naturally go in a circle. Once I have stretched it enough, it doesn't have that anymore. It just stays straight. That's how I know it's enough. It's also a question of habit. You can obviously overstretch it, and if you realize that your stitches are not quite sinking in as you're stitching, you may think that you haven't stretched it enough. So that's a lesson learned. How much you stretch it is really a question of preference and habit. So do it again, train yourself with it, find something that you're confident with, and at some point it will fit into place. Once I've done that, I'm using my Goldwork scissors, which have a serrated blade. So that's a clean cut to cut a end, to cut the end. I'm going to be using a size 10 embroidery needle. Sometimes it's called a sharp needle, size 10, but an embroidery needle works as well. I think they're actually the same thing. It's just a question of name. I may be wrong though. I only use John James, and they call it an embroidery needle. It's a needle with a slightly longer eye and a sharp point. I always stitch with a knot. I know some people don't, but I do. And my trusty clover leather thimble that I wear on my middle fingers on both hand. As much as I always start with a knot, I also always start with a stopping stitch, or most of the time. Like that, I'm sure it stays in. And I start on the line in an area that I know will be covered. and it is just a question of couching. I tend to use a color that again, that's something where people differ from depending how you've trained, where you've trained, and your preference. You can either match the color of your couching thread to your purl, but what I found with all those weird and wonderful colors that are stock on the website is it's actually easier to match to the background fabric, because it disappears better. It disappears through the coil of the wire, and it also disappears, it blends in with the background fabric, especially when working on dark fabric. If I was using a light green here, it would literally stand out more. And I come up on one side, come down on the other. The idea is that when you pull your thread through, you should hear a pop. I don't know if the camera is going to pick it up. That is if it wants to go in. Good example. If it doesn't want to go in, it's more often than not because you're not in the right place, or because you haven't quite stretched enough the wire, which may be the case here. Let's try that again. Make sure, the thing is that we're working on such contrasting wire color and background fabric color. If your stitches don't quite sink in the coil, they will show. And if it's not going in easily and you need to be a bit brutal with it, there is a risk that it will, as much as those wires are quite resistant, there is a risk that it will kink the wire. So try not to do that. If you're really struggling with getting the stitches to sink in, I would suggest you stretch your purl a bit more. So as you can see, as I couch, I am making sure my wire is in the position I want. I found that gives me a smoother line. Right, this flap of fabric is actually annoying me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, I've got these plastic quilting clips on my table. Always, there's like a big pot of them. I use them for everything. Putting together stacks of paper, or for this, putting away the fabric that annoys me. All right, I carried on stitching off camera. I went all the way around. This is what I was saying, that your threads, your catching stitches, if you pull a bit too much, I didn't do that on purpose, it just happened, it will kink your wire. So not quite happy with this bit here. I will usually try to kind of like sort of fix it with my tweezers. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't if the kink is too bad. That one, not too bad. Now I'm near the end. So what I want is I want to try to join this as seamlessly as possible. So once I'm near the end like this, I will try to estimate where roughly I will end, and then use my scissors to kink them and then cut them. Now I should be able to more or less make that seamless as I'm stitching it in place. This is where things like your mailer can come handy, because as you're stitching you can then push the wire and making sure that it's going where you want it to go. So I'm gonna carry on finishing that. Trying to not make it too straight, because otherwise it's going to be obvious. Again, I'll use my tweezers to make sure it stays where I want it to be. There we go. It's not too bad. To finish my thread, I'll go in a shape that I know will be covered, or alongside it if I'm only doing line work. And I do 2 little stitches, and then go back up and cut flush to the surface. That's enough to fix it. It's not going to be worn like as a wearable garment, so that should be enough. And that's it. I'll check. I'm a bit of a fiddler, so I'll always check whether my purl is in the right place. One of the things I did, you may have noticed earlier, but I had 2 lines here that had kind of extended in that portion of it that I want to remain blue. So what I did is I scratched them with my mallow actually, and then I did put a bit on water on top to try to disperse the remaining white. I'll probably clean that up with a bit of cotton bud later. I have a little bit here that's showing as well. That's the benefit of using gouache, is you can sort of remove it. Obviously it's quite obvious on this dark blue, but it will that is fixable. Here we go. So I'm going to carry on doing the outline of those petals. I will see if I can try to do that in one single length. I still have some of my pre-stretched purl. I probably stretched a lot more than I needed, but what I noticed as I was stitching is that it was not quite stretched enough, so I'm going to give it another tug and show you how to go through those petals, and in particularly those sharp points at one end and another, and give it that S curve. So I need more Gutermann thread. Zoom out a little. One of the tricks I use, especially at the beginning like this, when I'm trying to get two wires to start on each other, is that after the first couple of stitches, I will kind of twist, like in between my fingers and forefinger, so that the joint is as flush as it can be. It will kind of slightly mold itself in the right direction, which is exactly what I want. Gonna start the first bend of the S shape. Again, still maintaining my wire in place. See, that stitch is not in the right position, so I'm going to come out. Pull it out gently. And try again. Sometimes a little smidge of a millimeter is all you need to get it correct. There we go. Now that I'm almost at the change in the curve, I will use something like my meller to keep it in place and push the wire in the other direction to give it that nice S shape. Going right up to the tip. One more, just to make sure I'm really right at the tip. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my thread underneath, and pick up my tweezers. So I'm using those double-ended tweezers. They're really my favorite because one side is pointy, which I actually rarely use, but sometimes it comes in handy, and the other side is flat. I pick up my wire and I bend gently, but also forcefully, and I try to stay parallel to the surface. I then pick both of them and make sure it's really closed up. Then I can create the other side of the S-curve. If my S-curve here is not quite as good as it should be, I will also use the tweezers to put it in shape if I can, without kinking it, which is what I've just done. That's okay. I am obviously not having a good day today. Right, this time, because I'm going straight against that other wire, I'm stopping just before. I'm gonna grab my wire where I think it should bend. So I'm estimating the distance. Again, bending it really on itself and trying to make it fit. Sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't. It's just a question of literally making the wire do what you want it to do, not necessarily what it wants to do. That doesn't work. I can always cut it and start again, but rather try to do it in one go if I can. Right, you get the gist of it. I am going to carry on off camera and then come back for the last layer. I mean, the principle will be the same. Again, trying to do it in one length as well. Right, I finished all the purple in the middle. And now I'm going to do the outside one with the thicker one. Same principle. I am putting it in place and stitching it all around. It is a little bit easier to do bigger motif like this. So And you don't need a thicker purple to do the outside. It's just a change in thickness, just for texture, really. It's nice to play with both.